My name is Marcy Shapiro, and I'm from the Solidarity Committee of the Americas. And I think every bad technology thing happened this morning. Not every bad one, but a lot of them. And also, Rodrigo, who's our guest from Cuba, is having problems now in Cuba. So it's kind of matching up with Minneapolis, where we are. There's a blackout in Cuba, which is a frequent thing. And so hopefully it'll be done in a few minutes and he'll be back on with us. So I want to just say that this coffee hour is was the idea of Solidarity Committee of the Americas, but the travelers from the trip were the real impetus because they came up with a presentation and they are going to be the main part of what we're going to be talking about. We'll have a few minutes of just kind of housekeeping stuff, and then if Rodrigo can be on, we'll put Rodrigo on whenever he can get on. So from Cuba, and he's going to talk about travel to Cuba. And so that's the main overview of what we're going to do. The travelers are going to be taking the lead on the content. This trip that they went on was initiated by the Solidarity Committee of the Americas, and it's co-sponsored by Proximity Cuba, which is from Rodrigo, is our connection to Proximity Cuba, and also Code Pink was a co-sponsor. We have quite a few co-hosts for this event, and we want to thank them for doing that and helping to reach out to the community to let them know about it. So I am an MC with Jairus Heckler, and she'll be talking in a minute. But I just want to say, so you won't think that I'm or Jairus is an S. We are going to really make sure that the time is kept to. So we will be putting up little time cards, and I'll show them to the speakers so they know that this is what they look like. It's a file folder with time on it, very, very fancy. And so we will try to keep us on track for time. We're asking each person to talk about 3 minutes, but if it takes a little longer, they have their own organization for this, so they have the topics. So before we go on, Jairus is going to tell you something about the Solidarity Committee of the Americas.
Thank you, Marcy. My name is Jairus Heckler, and I'm also a member of SCOTA, which stands for Solidarity Committee on the Americas. We're based in Minneapolis, St. Paul, Minnesota, and we're a committee of WHAM, Women Against Military Madness. We meet on Fridays at about 10 o'clock, and we're starting a new meeting time on Tuesdays, one Tuesday a month, and that will start on December 13th. So for people who work, maybe you can join us sometime. Some of the duties in our plans in SCOTA are that we've initiated and organized monthly car caravans in solidarity with national groups working to end the blockade against Cuba. Caravans are usually on the last Sunday of the month, but the next one will be on January 29th. We develop and host coffee hours like this one on Latin American countries. We actively participate in national Cuban solidarity organizations, and this includes working to get city resolutions passed to end the blockade and to remove Cuba from the state sponsors of terrorism list. We also lobby about issues related to Cuba and other South American countries. And this was our first sponsored trip to Cuba. So we're very happy to have people share their experiences.
So you don't even talk about that.
Yeah.
So I just wanted to say two more things and then we can start with the presentation. Are you ready, Mary?
Yeah.
Okay. So for people who are in the room, we're doing this three different ways. We have a group of people in the room here who are sitting happily eating donuts, bagels, and coffee and fruit. So that's a good reason to come to the event. But we're also doing it on Zoom and on Facebook Live. And I want to ask the people in the room, why don't you donate a little money to the payment of the food and other things at SCOTA and WHAM. WHAM is our parent organization, and so there's a jug up in the front. You could put your money in there. And then the other thing is I want to ask Carla to let me know when Rodrigo comes on, because we'll kind of interrupt for a minute and do that. Okay, so I want to introduce Mary Kosov, who is going to coordinate the presentation. I guess you are, huh?
I just found this out.
Who's sitting next to me, and she'll kind of just announce the different topics and whoever's going to speak about it. So I'm turning it over to Mary till the end of the presentation. Except, Mary, I may interrupt you for Rodrigo if he gets on.
Of course, yeah.
Okay.
Can everyone hear me okay? Remotely. Can everyone online hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, I think we got a yes. All right, awesome. So I was just one of 9 people who actually took this trip November 5th through the 12th. If we could maybe go around and introduce the other folks who also took the trip. We have Shashadri here. Do you want to introduce yourself, please?
Shashadri, I was born in India, and I'm living here for the last 20 years. I was so excited to make this visit because I am the generation which lived through the entire process of revolution. So how that I only read in the newspapers in the other parts of the world. So how the revolution is going on, what are all the ups and downs. We are all worried that this revolution has to survive and prove to the whole world that it's another society possible, where you don't have to depend on capitalism to create needs of people. We need a society where we can help each other and bring, and all the activities are centered around working for the common good of the people. So this is a different thing. I wanted to see from my good, and so I had to wait till my retirement to make this move. And I had the same fear that, like many people in the United States, we are all banned from going to Cuba. I also believed that, but it has been proved to be a myth by this.
Yes.
And the second myth is, it's so easy. It is much easier than going to any other country than going to Cuba. The only questions they permit is there are 12 categories of things the government of the United States allows us, every one of us, to visit Cuba. So some people use the people-to-people relationship or solid supporting Cuban people like that. So these are all, there are ways to go into Cuba like a normal person.
Shashadri, we'll have an opportunity to kind of talk about all of that. We just want to do quick introductions now, if that's okay. All right. Dad or Austin or Brissa, would one of you like to chime in? Just introduce yourself.
Okay, I'll go next really briefly. I'm a retired English as a second language teacher. That's mostly what I did through my career. I retired from the University of Wisconsin in Superior. And maybe just one other thing, besides having now been to Cuba, I've been to Vietnam, to China, to Palestine, all these places that are the objects of U.S. attention, let's say. And so this eye-opening too. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, that was Robert Kasuth. Next.
I can go next.
Great.
I'm Austin Cooper. I live in Tulsa, Oklahoma. And I joined the trip so that I could see how a country that is organized not for profit, but for meeting the needs of the people goes about doing that. And so I could share that with the people back in America.
Brissa, I saw you for a brief moment.
Hi, everyone. Nice to see you all today, / Zoom in today. I'm from Fresno, California, and I joined the trip also just to learn about Cuba and the situation there. And I had an amazing time and learned so much from the trip. It was really great. Oh yeah, I just also recently graduated from university, studied English, and hoping to do some more like political activism work and yeah, learn more about Cuba. So thank you all.
Awesome. Okay. So yeah, there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of us. I think I can count on a Saturday morning that took this trip. So I just kind of pulled together a real quick summary of our, and just go through some of the pictures. And this is very informal, but I'll just try to keep moving it along. But would love to get it, as I'm like switching through these slides and kind of looking at the itinerary here, perhaps we can, those of you that were on the trip, share experiences, just, I guess, kind of jump in because that's just how we're rolling today. All right, so starting off with history, these are just some of the museums that we went to. And maybe we can start with this one here. Dad, do you want to talk about this one a little bit? My father quipped when we were on the bus, how could they put so many of these things and fit them all in one building?
Yeah, I made the comment that when we got off the bus to go to this museum, and it's supposed to be a museum of the U.S. Incursions, and I said, "Well, is this building big enough?" So just the U.S. has done so much, but there really is just so many things. We always hear about the Cubans this, the Cubans that, but there's just the U.S. is such an aggressive, arrogant power in the world, and to see this, all the things they've done, as I say, if you go to Vietnam, the War Remnants Museum in Vietnam, it's astounding, the same thing. So I'd say one thing I learned from this is not just about Cuba, but about the nature of the United States. What kind of a place is the United States that it would do things like this so arrogantly and aggressively?
Okay, thank you. Anyone else want to chime in about their experience at this museum? This was the first place I heard about the Peter Pan project. I did not know about that. 14,000 Cuban children separated from their families as rumors, after the revolution spread. And there are also all kinds of documents there that have been declassified, so you can peruse those. I also think it was kind of interesting. I was just kind of searching about it online, and the Lonely Planet had something about it being, highly propagandized or something like that. And then I looked at the War in Vietnam Museum in Ho Chi Minh City, which I've also been to, and there they said, it was very moving. And, it was a very different tone. And so then I was looking up Lonely Planet because I thought they were owned by an Australian company. No, actually it was bought out by an American company in 2013. So all that completely makes sense. Anyways.
Yeah, I just wanted to say real quick that I think this museum, you go to Cuba, and something that's reiterated so much is that they don't want to antagonize. They don't want to be an antagonist of the United States. They don't want their people to harbor animosity for years and years, but them telling the truth about these various acts of terror and plots against the Cuban people is enough, basically, for the United States to designate them as antagonists, as spewing propaganda and trying to brainwash their people or something.
Yeah, great point. Chaudhry?
Yeah, this is a very important museum we all have to see, because we do not know many of the things that are happening. If there is a person on earth who went to heaven or hell, to the gates of heaven or hell, and came back to earth, means it was Fidel Castro. More than thousands of times, the USA has attempted to assassinate him in different ways. Still, he survived and lived his full life, and made use of his life to preserve the revolution in Cuba and be an inspiration for the revolutionaries around the world.
Okay, thank you. All right, moving on to the next slide. We went to the Grandma Memorial, and these are just some images. I couldn't fit a whole lot on the slide, but would anyone like to talk about that?
Yeah, it's actually Fidel Castro was in Mexico organizing group of revolutionaries, including his brother Raul, to go and take over a big power. If you go and see the Cuba Havana, the power centers are all so huge and so big. It is so threatening to the thing. It is so amazing how a group of people are able to reach Havanas, and in the process they lost a lot of their comrades, and still they reached few people, and they went and took over the palace and seized the political power. This is a very amazing thing. I can only saw this in movies, not in real life, which we are able to see it there. That museum explains everything, and the yacht they used to go is designed for few people, less than 20 people, and 81 people or something, they went in that, and that became a symbol. So the grandma, even the newspaper of the Cuban Communist Party is called Grandma. I didn't know what it was. I came to know only after seeing the.
Okay. Thank you. Yeah, we have a lot of slides to get through. I don't mean to be rude to move things along, but we have a lot of slides. We also visited the Literacy Campaign Museum. Brissa or I don't know, would you have something?
Yeah, I can say something.
Share? Yeah, awesome.
Yeah, so this was honestly one of my favorite parts of the trip, just because before like coming to Cuba, I had studied just a little bit about the literacy campaigns. But for anyone who doesn't know, during the revolution, they had in Cuba, they had a social program that sent urban youth to the rural countryside to teach campesinos and other people like in the rural areas how to read and write. And I think it was between just like 2 years or a year, they had the literacy rate jump from like, I also can't remember the numbers from the top of my head, but over 90%. And it's one of the most successful literary campaigns in the, not literary, sorry.
It is.
Literacy, there we go. Literacy campaigns. Sorry, it's 8 a.m. in my location.
No problem, you're doing great.
Yeah, literacy campaign, thank you. Literacy campaigns in the world. And it just sparked a lot of other movements in Latin America to like increase literacy rates, also in Guinea-Bissau, Australia, just worldwide. And yeah, all the ideas and like all the materials were really just all the materials were really inspired by the revolution, and it was one of like the most I think it's a really cool example of like the revolution and just like this collective movement to like help one another out. So yeah,
I think it was like 700 people who were educated within a year, and they used a lot of youth There was a youth group involved, and it was an amazing feat. And then once they had success within Cuba, they started sending people and programs abroad, and there were many nations that benefited from this program. So pretty amazing.
And
okay,
oh, sorry, I was just saying real quick, the importance of the literacy campaign is obvious through the timing of that Peter Pan project that you mentioned before. It took place before the literacy campaign, and they got this literacy campaign going pretty quickly after the revolution. But even in just that small window, the U.S. was able to take advantage of the poor literacy in Cuba to convince all these parents that they had to evacuate their children because of, you know, whatever the monster communists were going to do to them. So yeah, it's hugely important.
Yeah, literacy is so important if you're going to have an engaged, you know, society, right? So this is essential. Yeah, such a good point. We also went to the Fidel Castro Museum. Dad, did you want to chime in about the previous one and maybe this one?
Yeah, the previous one, because just real quick, you know, you see these people holding these kerosene lamps, these 2 or 3 women, and these are kerosene lamps that were needed because people were working long hours every day and they could only do their literacy work at night. And these lamps, thousands of them came from China, along with notebooks and pencils. So China and Cuba were helping each other. Yes, those communist countries were working together. What? Teaching people how to read and write. That's what they were doing. And there's also one other quick thing. There are also people who were working on the literacy campaign, young people in their teens and 20s, they were assassinated by opponents to the revolution. And just that's how, you know, intent, as Austin was saying, they are in keeping people illiterate and ignorant.
Right. Yeah. Because that is the real power, right? being engaged. Okay. The next was the Fidel Castro Museum, which, as somebody who used to work at the Bell Museum of Natural History, I was super impressed. This was really an amazing museum. Very well done. Anyone else like to talk about this? This particular picture here, the large one, was a really cool interactive piece where you could go around and you could pull out these cylinders and stick them into the display case below, and it will show you pictures of Castro in these or Cuba's work in these different parts of the world, just to show you how internationally engaged Cuba was. But yeah.
The Fidel Castro Museum not only explains the life of Fidel Castro, it explains the whole process in which Cuba went through, in which the most integral part was, central part was eradicating the illiteracy in the whole country, and also this is the high-tech technology used to the maximum. You cannot imagine. I got my answer before going there was may not be exploiting the technological advances here, but they proved me wrong, which is the highest technology to explain the whole process of how Fidel Castro contributed to the Cuban society as well as to the global community.
And also we were told that that Castro really insisted he didn't want to have like big busts of himself, you know, or streets named after him or parks named after him. He really was it struck me as a very, you know, humble person, just, you know, working in this in solidarity with so many other people. That's what it was about. It was about all those people coming together. Anyone else want to chime in?
Yeah, and one thing that I thought was really interesting about the museum was that they were calling on the community to submit photos and kind of add to this archive. And again, I feel like that was one of the elements that just really highlighted Cuba as a very like collective society, and like with like they care about what the community like wants to hear and like submit and like see out of like this space. So I just thought that was something that was cool.
Yep, absolutely. Thank you, Brissa. This we can just go through this one really quickly. Why is this? Okay. The cannon firing ceremony we did, I think it was like Monday or Tuesday night, where we went out underneath this highway that goes underneath a little, not a fjord, but you know, a bay, yeah. And we heard the cannons fired, and it's just too bad that oops, it's too bad that Rodrigo isn't here with us. This was our amazing interpreter and guide. There was a fellow out there who was like drawing caricatures of people and then giving them out. And this is him with his caricature. And I never laughed so hard. Anyways, we also did a walking tour and saw. This was in Old Havana. Am I right about that? Would someone like to? Yep. So we walked for many blocks, and our guide told us about the larger homes that have now been split up into smaller homes that multiple families can live in. Anyone else want to chime in on this one?
The effect of sanction we can only see in those places. The other places are all as good as yes, even the roads and all that better than ours. There is no pothole or anything. But in the old Havana, where the common people are living, we can see the effect of how the sanctions are affecting them. They are not able to get enough money to repair the roads and other community-related things.
Okay, so moving on to the next segment, which is culture, arts, music, and food. These are just some images. The one in the center is a statue from the walking tour. On the right, we were treated to a fashion show, which was my first experience. We've got some papaya and coffee on the upper left-hand side, and some food that we had, family-style meal at Funster's house, essentially. So let's talk about the first place that we stopped. There was an artist whose art is described as Afro-Cuban, and we got to go through his home and see his art. And would someone else like to chime in on this one?
Maybe briefly, I think I was really impressed about the integration of races. You see Afro-Cubans everywhere in society working with other people. They're not at all a silent minority. And Afro-Cuban culture is highly prized. The one thing they said, this person who gave us this tour said, we think our Afro-Cuban culture is a distinct culture. It's not just come from Africa, but come from Africa and develop on its own, So I found that impressive. We're so far away from having that acceptance of cultures in the United States, and yet we talk about it constantly.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And we also, they have these images here, orishas, which are like a collection of items that's supposed to represent the face of God. These are just notes that I took, so I am not speaking as somebody who is an expert at all, but we just learned a great deal about it and how they used Catholicism also as a means in some ways to still practice their religious beliefs, but doing it in sort of secret. And so they kind of used it to, I thought that was just an act of, resilience, despite the fact that they were, they had to, in a lot of ways that Catholicism was, kind of brought to them, imposed on them. Anyone else? Should I move on? We went to Fabrica de Arts Cubano. I feel like, Brissa, you and Milo went there more than I did. I only went one night. It was amazing. Maybe you could talk a little bit more about it.
Yeah, of course. So Fabrica de Arto Cubano was I think it used to be a oil factory that they kind of like revamped, or they made a art cooperative out of. So basically here they have a bunch of art galleries, a bunch of artists come to showcase their work. It's really like a little hub for different like people to come together and like anyone jump in here too if yeah. But there's like bars, there's a restaurant in there, and they have different stages where they show music. There we go. That's what I was gonna say. They have live performances, different shows. One of the nights Milo went, she saw a theater play. And then another night we went together, there was we went multiple times because we loved it here. It was so cool, absolutely amazing. There was a performance by a Cuban artist, and it was really cool. It was acoustic set, and here you're able to walk around, and like each of the walls has like different art pieces, and is like a mini art gallery. So it's a very artistic space, a very lively space, and yeah, you can see a lot of like the cultural slash like the nightlife revolves around here.
Yeah, I would actually not say it was mini. It was quite large. It was a factory, so there were like many different levels and all these different gallery spaces. And like Brissa said, it's you know, performing arts, you know, it's fashion, it's fine art, it's you know, kind of everything, and a very vibrant scene with a lot of young Cubans there. So it was really cool to see. We also went to the National Museum of Fine Arts, and I wish I could have put more images on there from that experience, but you know, these slides are so small, but again, just really amazing. I don't know if anyone wants to chime in there. There was a lot of discussion on the bus afterwards about the art that we saw and trying to interpret it. Okay, we also went to the Alba Community Theater, where we were treated to dance, various types of dance, and we'll talk about this a little bit more in community. But would anyone else like to chime in on this? Okay, we went to Jose Rodriguez Futster's neighborhood, where this artist, you can kind of see on the left-hand side. Actually, that's Austin there, I think, in on one of the platforms. You can kind of go really far up and sort of survey the neighborhood from up above, and it's incredibly impressive. The intricacies of this work and how it's just sort of like just flourished. It's spilled out of his, you know, of his area and into like the neighborhood. And we got to meet the artist himself, which we were told by Rodrigo is, you know, he's like kind of had enough of meeting people. He's in this age where he doesn't feel like he needs to do that, but he sat down and ate with us, and it was again one of the best meals, and it was a very interesting conversation. Anyone else?
Yeah.
Oh,
Okay,
sorry,
go ahead, Austin. Yeah, go ahead.
I was just gonna say he, you know, the way he approached building this like art piece, you know, throughout the community is just, it's very community centric, and that's something that you just is reiterated time and time again when you're in Cuba, is just how much of everything there is not individualist, it's community centric. It's about doing things for the people around you, and yeah, that's it.
Totally.
I was just going to say, you know, if you hear people talk about, you know, oppression or whatever, you go there and you see there's all this artistic activity, all this cultural activity. You know, there's certainly just a lot of vibrant activity of all kinds going on. So you got to go there and see it, and then you'll know.
Yeah, this is the opposite of oppressive. I mean, I feel like there must be more artists there per capita than anywhere else. And I you know, I think about my fast-paced life, you know, feeling like I'm in the rat race. I don't have time to explore these kinds of things and develop creative projects and stuff, you know. And so I think that must be something inherent in their cultural values. Also, we saw music. Various music experiences on the street, as well as treated to some music while we were having a meal. Okay, so now we're moving on to the national local organizations. One of the first mornings we went to ICAP, and I'm just trying to look in the itinerary here. Sorry. Yeah, how about, yeah, the Cuban Institute of Friendship with the Peoples, that's ICAP. And we got to ask a lot of like just basic questions and about culture, about the relationship between the United States and Cuba, about the real history of that relationship, or some history, because again, as a student of a student here in the United States, I learned virtually nothing about Latin America, you know. Yeah, who would like to chime in about this? Anyone?
I wanted to say, this is one part of the whole diplomatic efforts they are making for relationship with other countries, people and all. So the recent United Nations resolution against the sanctions, except 2 countries, most countries voted for Cuba. So that itself, for further, the foundation has been laid by similar organizations to connect with the people of other countries. This organization is playing a main role, and they disseminate information for them and help them to visit their country. These are all they are doing.
Anyone else?
Yeah, I thought this meeting was super informative too. I remember, yeah, we got the opportunity to ask basic questions, but also we got some of like a brief history of Cuba within this conversation. I just remember the facilitator. I can't remember his name right now, but he said that there was no answer to Cuba that doesn't go back to the blockade. So I thought that was, yeah, super informative. And also, they just really highlighted how complex Cuba is with this history and like, so yeah.
Yeah, that's great. Anyone else?
A thought on this. The thing that's really important is about the national organizations are integrated with all kinds of local organizations. So you have the Federation of Cuban Women. They have a national head, but they're also integrated to all kinds of local organizations so that they can carry on their work right down at the grassroots. Same thing with the healthcare. There's a national coordination, but right down to the grassroots in every neighborhood, as someone else had said. That's really so different from here.
Absolutely. We also went to FMC. FMC. Yes. Thank you, Brissa. Where we met with there were three women who talked about maternal health, reproductive health, women's involvement in politics. This was a super interesting meeting. Anyone else want to kind of chime in with the story from this at all?
It was just another good example of seeing what their priorities are, the things that they talk about. You just don't hear in U.S. public policy discussions of how are we going to take care of the elderly, how are we going to specifically identify groups, communities, minorities especially, who have specific needs, and then how are we going to actually get that done? Are we going, they talk about going to people's houses, and you ask these follow-up questions about how does this implemented, how are these decisions made, how the structure operates, and there's no hypothetical to it. It's like, yep, this is how we do it. We go and meet with them in this way, and it's just well set up, and it prioritizes the needs of those communities.
Nice, thank you. And then, did you want to add something?
I just want to add only one thing. If a working woman gets pregnant, if you compare it with our country, they get 1 year. They will not be sent out of the job. Mm-hmm. If by chance they need to extend that 1 year period for some more months, they will be paid 60% of their pay. Still, they can stay there and take care of the child. That sort of thing is an amazing. I never heard of in any country.
Yeah, that, and also they have paternal leave as well. So not just maternal leave. I thought it was interesting that they want to keep the paternal leave until the baby is after 6 months, because they want to encourage breastfeeding, which makes complete sense. We met this woman who at an evening event where I thought it was just going to be like an hour, ended up being 4 hours of conversation with real Cuban people talking about their lives. And this woman who was from New York and quite pregnant decided to come back to Cuba Cuba to have her baby because of the health care that she knows of there, and because from experience, and then also the ability to have family and friends help her out in that community, and because of the family leave that she has access to. So really great. We also met with a neighborhood organization. I really loved this. I'll just say a couple things. So there's a picture of all of us here. They did a couple things during COVID. They built a skate park for young people because, they were probably, just wanted to get out and do something and be involved without, and be outside. So I thought that was really amazing. They also talked about how the government would provide them funds to buy materials to build homes for people that needed it. So there was a single mother who had 3 children, I believe. And so the community got together, built a home for her. There was an elderly person who needed a home. There was a community center for elderly because the Havana demographics are actually skewed older, and so that's one of the challenges that they have. And so they have, like craft projects, they have support, all of this community support. And as somebody who's my in-laws are actually in their 80s, and my mother-in-law is in an assisted living facility now, and she's lonely and she feels separated from her family, and it's just heartbreaking. And when I came back from Cuba, I sat down with her and I was like, this is systemic. This is a systemic problem. Like, we don't have to be like this. And so I thought that was really, really awesome. Please, someone else chime in about this.
Yeah, this specifically, the committees for the defense of the revolution, the CDRs, was by far the most revolutionary and enlightening part of this trip for me. I mean, this is the grassroots democratic element of the Cuban government. I mean, this is how they, maintain their community engagement. This is how they meet the needs of their community. Like Mary said, as far as addressing their needs, building facilities, building things for the youth and stuff. This is how they interact with, if there's a small theft or something, this is the kind of group that is going to bring that person in and try to explain to them the harm that they were doing to their community. I mean, there was a point where Mary and I as well, we were interested in, comparing this to the United States, where we have these mental health crises and the police step in, and of course we all know this results in innocent people dying in tragedy. And, not in a rude way, but they more or less like laughed in amazement at this idea of how you would be treating mental health issues, that the way they would approach it is, of course, to have the community take that person and help them and get them to the proper facilities and engage them with the community. I mean, it's so obvious that that's a better solution, but yeah. It's until you're there and you see it, it's just, they make it so clear that this alternative that we talk about and we hope for, and that, in especially socialist spaces theorize about, it's implemented here, at least in some capacity. And that's just so transformational to how their society operates and prioritizes things.
Yeah. Thank you. They were like, we don't call the police, we call a doctor. Amazing. Right. Imagine that. Also, there are, and not to get too much into it, but one of our Canadian friends who joined us, so he was like, well, there's also less guns in the hands of everyday people. So we cannot, that's a component as well. All right. Does anyone want to talk about, this is the, again, I'm pulling up my itinerary here. This is an organization group that deals with environmental. Yeah, okay. While I'm looking for it.
Espinal, isn't it? Espinal.
Yes.
This, as far as the mental health is concerned, there was an interesting conversation with our group and the local organization. They are all from different walks of life, administering the local administration. They said mental health, they don't take it as a law and order problem, and they involve the whole society, the family, society and the doctor, and then there is no place at all for cops to come to them. See, that is what we compared with our countries.
So we had an idea here that maybe we should open up the chat and take a look at some of the questions. Does that sound good? We'll take a little break here from the slideshow.
So the first question is, are artists subsidized?
Oh, the artists subsidized. I actually,
We can answer.
yeah, please.
So they are subsidized. Everybody, for example, I'll give you an example of somebody that a lot of people in Minnesota know. Gloria Rolando is a filmmaker in Cuba, and Gloria she's paid by the Cuban Film Institute. And then she has to raise money for her films, the actual production of them. But I think every artist in Cuba is subsidized if they're accepted to be subsidized by the government. Usually they go through school and then they automatically get subsidized after, unless somebody else has another.
Yeah, actually, there are a lot of artists, even the street artists we can see everywhere.
They're subsidized too.
So the basic thing is they all are provided with the basic needs by the government, all the people. Food, shelter, everything is assured. So they are able to pursue the artistic things freely. Here, even the best artist, if he has to work somewhere to pay for his bills, he has to sacrifice his artistic talents. That is not the thing. So that's visible wherever you go. There will be artists on the street.
So the next one is, did you all have an audience with the Cuban Foreign Minister?
We don't have any
No.
questions.
Bruno Rodriguez.
Okay,
Okay, that's all.
these two are related. Can someone compare Cuba's view of children and the family and compare it to the United States, in particular as it views people on welfare? And can someone compare homeless in Cuba to the United States?
I can tell one. As far as homelessness is concerned, it's not an issue at all in Cuba. Everybody is taken care of their shelter. They are taken care of their food, medical, health care. All these things, normal people do not have to worry about it. It's all the government's responsibility, community's responsibility. All are, they don't depend only on government. So everybody comes and takes care of that problem. So there is no homelessness. In fact, I come from a country where miles of slums will be visible. In Bombay, Mumbai, you can see 2 miles, 3 miles slums. Such slums are not, I can't see anywhere else, anywhere in Cuba.
And you guys learned much about how Cuba recently changed the constitution to redefine family.
Yeah. So we learned about the latest rendition of the Family Code, where I mean this was drafted a long time ago, but it's been updated, because times change. Imagine that. And so Rodrigo told us about how this was something I think that started before the pandemic. I think it was finally passed around the time that Hurricane Ian had hit. So it was a very recent thing. And he talked about how there were 24 drafts, and it was the 25th draft after much national discussion that was finally adopted. And this includes, among other things, I think there were 9 portions of it, but one of them was the legalization of same-sex marriage, the ability for same-sex couples to adopt. And I think also, I don't know if this is about part of the family code, but I have in my notes about gender reassignment surgery being something that can be covered by health insurance.
Another thing
was that okay?
Another thing we have to process is that vote. Even in our country, LGBT communities are all being looked at as a criminal for certain section of the society. But in Cuba, they passed a legal resolution ensuring the rights of LGBT community.
It also extended recognition of different families, including grandparents, and the changing family structure of the whole country.
Yeah, I have in my notes rights of elders, rights of children, really emphasizing that.
And anti-violence.
Yes, that's right. That was something that we talked about with the women's organization, addressing domestic violence, how they do that, and I thought it was very interesting that one of the things they said is, well, by improving education and employment opportunities so that women are not economically dependent on partners, that is a really key way of addressing that. It really gets at the root of the problem.
I'll just say something more about the gender reassignment surgery. It's just a little fact. So the idea of it came from Fidel Castro, and he decided that Fidel researched scientific stuff all the time, and he knew about gender reassignment surgery. So he decided, this is years ago, this is not recently, he decided that it would be free for anybody in Cuba who wanted it. So there's a great film about, which I can't remember the name of, about a woman who had the surgery and her relationship with talking to Fidel about it. So he was very creative man. So
again, that's like the complete opposite of an oppressive government. I just don't understand where that comes from. Well, I do know where it comes from, but.
Absolutely. And one more thing I want to throw in, and we'll probably talk about this when we get to health, but one of the things that I thought was absolutely amazing is that Cuba has a really low mortality rate. I want to say it's between 4 to 7%. And as Tim, our doctor friend from Canada, explained, is like a low mortality rate is a great indicator of the health of a population. So Cuba has a really low
Infant mortality rate, yes.
Yeah, low infant mortality rate. And this is also, it also correlates to a high level of education among the Cuban women, which both the FMC confirmed and the public health clinic. So just another fun fact I wanted to throw at you.
Thank you, Brissa. Also, the life expectancy of different races, I suppose, like however you want to categorize that. Here in the United States, not surprisingly, there's a huge disparity there. In Cuba, it's virtually nothing. So that's I think very indicative too of health equity. Okay. All right. So let's go through these relatively quickly. There were two places where we looked at farming. So I just have some images here of open markets where people would purchase their foods, like how do these foods get to the places where people can buy them and the table. So one place we went to was actually about an hour's drive outside of Havana, just kind of it's west along the coast, and it's a cooperative. On the upper right hand side, there are these 17 members that decided to pool their resources, their land, their tractors, all of these things together in order to create a cooperative. And there's only 3 of them that are still living today, but their children and grandchildren participate. And they built not only places where people to live, they had a doctor and a nurse that lives there as a resident. They built schools, they have a bus, they have a rec center. I mean, it's a real commune living situation. And we met with a farmer who talks about how they have, they didn't use organic, but it's like ecological produce. So they, after the Eastern Bloc fell, there was a huge shortage of pesticides, fertilizers, and all those things. And so they had to change their farming practices, but they're still able to have an amazing output. Anyone else want a quick jump in on that too? If not, then I'll again briefly, this is one of the things that I thought was really amazing, is that they have an area in Havana where it's 7.5 acres, and they grow all of these foods that's so very local, talk about locally sourced foods. This is right in the neighborhood, and they use, instead of using chemical pesticides, They use crop rotation. They use these non-chemical solutions to dealing with pests. And the fertilizers are made there on site, and they got really into that in great detail. And I will not bore you with the worm castings and all of that stuff that they use, but it was amazing. Not only plants, green leafy plants for consumption, but also medicines as well as cosmetics. And this is all just very local. Anyone else want to hop in? Okay, so now we'll talk a little bit about healthcare. This is the last segment. We went to a hospital. Austin, I don't want to, Austin's brother had a little eye problem. And when we were there, they're like, yeah, why don't you come back and we'll take a look at that. And then Ashton was like, oh yeah, we're in Cuba. That's no problem. Of course, the doctor's going to see me right now. So yeah, we had a chance to kind of talk with the director of the hospital. And so I just grabbed a picture of the hospital there. And then up on the wall in one of the small clinics, they have herbal remedies for various maladies. And I just think that's really cool that they use both sort of, it's a holistic approach, I guess, to health. And there isn't this sort of like shunning of other forms of medicine, which is really nice. So all of their documentation is on paper. So we've got an exam room here. And then we met with some of the doctors and the doctors in training. These students start when they're 17, and they are licensed doctors by the time they're 24. And their training is very practical. So it's, of course, there's a lot of academic book learning that has to happen, but also just very practical, hands-on, working with patients from the very beginning, which I thought was very impressive.
Actually, Cuba is the world leader in healthcare. They provide not only at to a community level, they produce a lot of doctors, and their doctors are going almost every country and serving there. So they bring back their knowledge also to their country. So this is how this two-way interaction is happening in that. And they have got the most sophisticated diagnostic equipments compared to our countries in those countries. And that's an amazing thing. And many people, wealthy people from US come there for medical tourism purpose.
Yeah, one thing I just wanted to say real quick. There is a drug that came out in 2006. It's actually a drug that's helped to preserve a limb if somebody is diabetic and they have they have the threat of amputation, right? This thing has been approved. It's been shown to be useful. The United States, because of the blockade, will not use it. I mean, it's just that's borderline criminal to just allow our American citizens to deny them this because of our political issues with Cuba.
Actually, Cuba is the only country which has invented a preventive vaccine for lung cancer. So I went and consulted with the doctors and all. They were so professional. And I was paying attention to every detail of us, and they are not only seeing the lung problem, they are seeing what is my whole health problems, and everything they analyzed 2 hours. That's a consultation I had. So it's a vaccine called SemaVax. Now the US government understood the importance of it, and cancer institute in New York State called the Roswell Institute, they are going to collaborate with the Cubans for that lung vaccine, bringing lung vaccine to USA.
Yeah, Brissa or someone else, did you want to hop in?
I was going to say something about the healthcare. Like everything else, we visited this regional hospital, and then we walked from there a matter of, I don't know, help me if I'm wrong, maybe 3 or 4 blocks at the most, and we went to a doctor's office, and the doctor's office, had this doctors as well as all these medical students, nurses, specialized within a couple of blocks, and in fact, we passed another one on the way. So within just 4 blocks, there were several doctors' offices. Imagine this: the doctor lives upstairs, not in some fancy suburb, and the other thing is that and people can walk in anytime, get help. It doesn't cost anything. What other thing I was going to say?
Yeah, he lived in the community for over 21 years.
Yeah, yeah. And I think the other thing is that that the doctor's office, correct me my number if I'm not sure if I remember, I was trying to look it up, but maybe about 250, 300 families in the area that this doctor's office serves. So as other people have said in other areas, they're treated on the family level, because if you have a problem, it could be a dysfunctional family. It could be solved by family issues, not just treating everybody individually and twisting in the wind alone.
Yep.
And I think we even passed another doctor's clinic on the way to this one.
Yes,
I mean,
yeah.
the ease of access, I think, cannot be overstated how important that is. I mean, in America, we focus on things like the criminality of bankrupting people for suffering injuries because they don't have healthcare, but they also in Cuba don't have the same issues that we have with depression and anxiety. And a lot of that comes from not having all these hoops you have to jump through, finding people to access, when the offices are only open when you're, at work. I mean, the accessibility of healthcare and health services is crucial to maintaining just the general health of the population.
Can I just ask, do they have their own insulin then? They've created their own insulin for people who are diabetic?
I don't recall that.
They are making their own.
Okay, yeah. They did. All I know is they did develop 5 different vaccines, and 2 or 3 were approved, and that's what they used on the island. But as far as insulin, I missed that.
Making and giving it free to the people.
Okay, yeah, right, yeah, okay, yeah, thank you, yeah. Okay, so that's our last slide. The
Latin America School of Medicine is a medicine that was started by Fidel, and it's been around for quite a few years. It trains hundreds of doctors around the world for free to be doctors in their own country. So, and they also train people from the United States who will go back and provide healthcare to poor communities and communities of color. All of the people who go, it's for free. They stay in the dorms for free. The whole thing is free. It's excellent quality care.
Over 200 have graduated now from there. They don't know.
Well, way more than 200. It's 200 in the last year, maybe.
A year ago.
Yeah. So the thing, I went to one of the graduations, and one of the things about it is people came from around the world, parents of the people who graduated, to see their families graduate. And it was amazing to see people from all of these countries come, because they were so proud of their children becoming doctors.
Can you repeat the question?
The question was, what is the status of the freedom of press in Cuba? Yep. I mean, I know that they have, the internet is available to them, so.
In this age of internet, everybody is free to express their own view, and Cuba is not restricting that. There is no press controlled by corporations like here. 6 corporations control hundreds of papers and news outlets. That sort of things are not there. So the way to get news is mostly from the social media, other than the government paper.
Grandma. There's a number of others, newspapers, regional papers around the country, and
communities.
In other, and there's a lot of radio stations, and that's a good way. I know my friend Mary Jean, who's over there, and I were interviewed by a radio station about our visit to
anti-Cuban radio stations are operating inside Cuba. They can listen to that.
Yeah, but I'm talking about their stations. This is, So Carla.
The Cuban government does block some of the U.S. propaganda.
Yeah, right. Radio Marti and television Marti.
I didn't know internet. I had the impression that there was the internet connectivity in Cuba was pretty low.
That has more to do with the United States, and that has to do with the United States does not allow Cuba to access the cables, and so they have to get like access from Venezuela and other countries, and so it limits it a little bit. And also the U.S. prevents social media like Zoom cannot be connected to somebody in Cuba. And Rodrigo, who is going to be on with us, has to use a VPN to get to Zoom.
Actually, in our rooms and all, we were able to watch CNN.
Yes, right, right.
I just wanted to just a little anecdote. So I TA for a class at the University of Minnesota because I'm a student there, and I was trying to access Canvas, which is a platform where we grade, right? And I had to grade even though I was there, which is totally fine. And I found out that I could not access Canvas, and I would get a message that said, because of the blockade, well, they didn't use the word blockade, but because of Cuba's, on a list, the United States will not allow you to access this platform, which is awesome.
So usually it's the U.S. that's preventing the access, not Cuba.
Yeah, let's hear from you.
I've been thinking about an issue only recently because of the social credit scores in China and because of the they're thinking of having vaccination passports and things here, even around the world. And the problem with stuff like this, with people being taken care of by the government, is that if you do something the government doesn't like, the government could then turn off your, well, this happened in Canada. They turned off funding of people who tried to support the truckers, for example, had their right. This is a very broad issue here, but I'm wondering if anything like that happens in Cuba, or if they're at all aware of this as a potential and doing anything to prevent that happening, so that if somebody says something that criticizes the government, or somehow maybe doesn't take their vaccine when they're told to, or whatever, that they would get their wouldn't be able to travel, wouldn't be able to get their services.
The vaccine is not required. The vaccines are not required, but everybody trusts their health care. The difference between the U.S. and is everybody trusts the healthcare system in Cuba, and so everybody wants to get a vaccine, which is so different than, but they're not required to get it.
The health care
protein in them. You do not have the dangerous spike protein in them.
Yeah, the healthcare system is set up in such a way, if there is some infection in local community, it will be handled immediately by the localized, because it's a bottom-up healthcare system. So if there is an infection, it will be localized and contained. So people are trusting the healthcare system.
Not just
health. It is not something that's coming from the top to the bottom.
Not just health, but other things too. Nobody's ever been cut off of services or something because they didn't do what they were told.
I've never heard it.
I would recommend, I put this in the chat. There's a great video documentary. It's got multiple parts called Belly of the Beast. So if you just search Belly of the Beast Cuba, there was one segment where this gentleman who has a magazine that's for LGBTQ community, and he talks about his experience with the government. And I just think I encourage you to maybe check that out, because that's a really great source to kind of hear from the Cuban people about those things.
There's a question here, and then I kind of have a final question.
I'm just wondering if, when you met with women's groups and groups on the family code, if they talked about how CDRs specifically responded to domestic violence in families. Apart from
That's
the
really
economic
important.
support of women, you know, not being sort of economically attached to partners.
There was one other thing that they mentioned. They want to get more women in the military and in the police force. They did admit, this is one of the things I really liked about this. It did not feel at all like they were just trying to show us that the way that they were doing it was the best way. All the people we spoke to were like, look, this is a work in progress. Here are the problems that we have. And they were very honest about them. And so they mentioned something about like, yeah, I mean, in the police department, there is some residual like machismo. And so, which, you know, as residents from the city of Minneapolis, like I can relate, like I understand what they're talking about because we got a whole lot of that here. But yeah, in order to address that, because they recognize that it's a problem, if a woman says that she has been battered or you know, sexually traumatized, that going to the police, they might not treat it as seriously, and so they recognize it as a problem, and are trying to address it. Yeah, yeah, by diversifying the police force, I think is one way. I don't know if.
And is it the police who are first responders for crimes of domestic assault and sexual assault and rape, or is it the CDR?
That's a really good question.
I think there's three different.
They don't come. Cops don't come in the domestic violence. It is the community.
Yeah, that makes
They
sense.
do. They do.
They are
I'll give you an example of the police coming. So the police come sometimes when it's very violent, and they will come and they don't arrest or shoot the person. They will sit and talk with the person. I was talking to a lawyer there who was saying that the very day we were there, that they had gone to a domestic violence situation, and the police sat for 4 hours talking to the person until the person calmed down and they could take them in. And so I think it's not singular like it is here. It's just the police here. I think it's the CDRs, it's the healthcare system, and it's the police, and it depends on the situation.
I just want to say too, because there was a comment in the chat here. I felt so incredibly safe walking on the streets by myself at night. Yeah, I would. There are parts of my home city that I feel less safe, just like from police and other factors than I did in Cuba. So.
I could second that, Mary. As like a young woman in Cuba, me and Milo we were able to feel like we were able to travel like really safely, even at night, or even like call a taxi, which can be very dangerous here in the United States.
I mean, I feel like it's really a deep cultural issue, right? You know, just the fact that everyone is everyone else's responsibility when you're living in a community, you know. And here we have, you know, it's just like I never felt this so much that after I had my first child, who's 13 now, but being stuck on a couch by myself for 3 months nursing him and talking to the cat, I was like, this is not natural. This isn't the way it's supposed to be. We're supposed to be in community with each other. I want to be sharing this experience with like my husband who's at work, or like, you know, my friends, you know, and but I felt so isolated. And there's just so many times when we experience that, I think, that as Americans, and it's this cultural nuclear family is the best, you know, which I think we need to challenge that. But as far as policies go, that's a great question. I don't know if someone else wants to jump in.
Not really. I think let's move on to the next question.
Okay.
She knows all about the family code more than anybody I know. So, so this last question, I'm going to ask specifically that people who went on this trip answer this, not any of us who've gone a lot of times. So, do you think people in Cuba are free compared to people in the United States?
Well, I would say here in the United States, we have the freedom to go to Target and pick out one out of 50 different types of toothpaste and one out of so many different types of toilet paper. That is me as an American exercising my freedom. What I don't have the freedom to do is the freedom to not die from a preventable disease. You know, I don't really have the freedom to change my political system in a meaningful way. So I don't know. Those are just my reflexive thoughts on that.
How about any of the other people who were there on that trip?
I would say one thing that's very important to me, given my experience having been drafted in the damn army to fight an imperialist war, that I don't have the freedom to have half of all the taxes I pay go to a huge military machine that's just marauding on the earth, over the earth, building nuclear weapons, aircraft carriers, and all these kinds of things. You know, people in Cuba have a lot less, but what they have is used for human needs. What we have is mostly used for weaponry. This is a huge, huge difference.
Yeah, $801 billion in 2021. I mean, I'm preaching to the choir here, but.
And I think
Yeah,
in
and then,
sorry,
you go.
I was gonna say, I think in general, like, you know, Cuba forces you to think about what freedom means, what democracy means. I mean, you know, you can be in a jail cell and be told that you have the freedom to move left and right within a 6x6 area. But, you know, that's I don't think that's really getting at the point. You know, we can talk a lot about freedom in America, and we certainly do, but like, you know, like Mary said, do you have the freedom to, I don't know, I mean, live your life? Like, do you have the freedom to pursue the things you want to pursue? I mean, in America, we don't even have the freedom to, for most people, to leave the tax bracket we were born into. So what is that? You know, what is that freedom?
Yeah, no, just seconding everything you guys are all saying. I just want to, this is just another example, but like, going to college, you could graduate like debt free, you could study whatever you want. It's not like forced upon you. You are able to, like, you have the freedom to choose, like Austin said, whatever you want to pursue, and like will be supported through like Cuba's resources, through their programs, to do whatever that is.
Yeah, I just want to say, like, there was one this evening where we were all, you know, talking for 4 hours. Somebody had, you know, we were talking about, you know, the shortage of like really essential things like toilet paper, and someone had said, well, we're poor, but we have everything, which I don't know. I feel like that. I want everything, not car. Like they said, a lot of young people are leaving because they want to have cars and they want to have these material things, you know. But what are you giving up in exchange for that? You know, the things that we as humans evolved to be in community with each other. That's how we're meant to be. So
I have a question.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, for Rodrigo. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Thank you.
What is that? Yeah. As far as the freedom, I don't consider freedom as an absolute thing. It's a relative thing. So the freedom that exists in Cuba, if my freedom, individual freedom, is going to affect the community or the society, that will be restricted. Here, if I'm going to be selfish, I'm going to be self-centered, I'm going to cut my co-worker to elevate myself. All these freedoms are allowed here. Those things are not allowed there. It is restricted there. So I feel freedom is a relative concept rather than an absolute concept.
Okay, so we're gonna kind of wind up. We have a few kind of housekeeping things to say, and maybe at the end talk about solidarity. So one thing I wanted to say is that Carla Reilly, who's right over here, so 6 of us from the Solidarity Committee of the Americas went on a very similar trip last February to Cuba, and Carla did videotapes of everything we saw and did, almost everything. It's an amazing amount of videotape. And so if there was something you heard about today and you want to hear more about, I would go to look at these videotapes because it's a lot of detail.
Are they on Facebook?
Yes, they're not on Facebook. They're on YouTube, and they're on the Women Against Military Madness YouTube channel. So all you need to do is go there, look, and there's every day you could see what we did. And I go back sometimes just to remember what some piece of what we did. So it was, I don't know if we can get up.
I can find it. I can put it in the chat.
Yeah, right. And so I want to just suggest that people, if you want to learn more detail, this was a fantastic presentation. And the best part was hearing what you had, your impressions of going to Cuba. Most of us who had gone last February had been to Cuba many times. So, but it was a great trip anyway. And so I want to encourage that. The other thing, so Rodrigo González, who was supposed to be part of this presentation, was supposed to come in from Cuba. And obviously there's still a blackout. Not that. There's a blackout in Cuba, so I guess it's not over with yet. And
I'm here.
oh, you are.
I didn't. Oh.
Okay, Rodrigo, why don't you say hi to us and talk to us about, especially about why it's so important to go to travel to Cuba. One is that there's 2 trips coming up from other groups that we wanted to let you know that Steps for Peace is doing a trip that is with Proximity Cuba where Rodrigo is from, and it's in, I don't remember the date. What's the dates, Rodrigo? Or, I don't know.
Hi.
December 6th. I think January 2nd. I don't know. So if you're interested, it's part of their Golden Rule Peace Boat, which came to Minnesota. So a lot of you may know about that. And the trip is going to be in Cuba. And so we wanted to let you know about that. Another trip is that Code Pink is doing a trip in February, which we probably co-sponsor. And so you could be going with them. And then thirdly, which is that Solidarity of the Americas is going to do another trip. And we're hoping to be in March. And we will keep you informed the last week in March that we'll keep you informed of. Okay, we're almost at our number thing. We don't know. Keep you informed of the date and the information. I just wanted to encourage people to donate. Hi.
Hi. I'm ready.
You're in warm Havana. We're in super freezing cold with snow, Minnesota. So.
Okay, I'm ready. Okay, first, can you hear me well? Can you hear me well, right?
Yes.
Perfect, good. Thank you very much for inviting me to this meeting. Thank you to all the organizers and the person that coordinated this meeting. Thank you very much. I've been listening the presentation, a wonderful presentation. Thank you very much for the presenters and for everybody who has participated. Very warm greetings from Havana, Cuba. My name is Rodrigo González. I'm one of the coordinators here of the programs, the Cuba program for Proximity Cuba, as in this case, for SCOTA and Code Pink. And also I'm involved in several community projects in Cuba, and I do research on Cuba, United States-Cuba relations. I'm gonna speak very briefly, only 5 to 10 minutes maximum. And in those 10 minutes, I wanna address 3 things. One, I would like to share my thoughts with you about why it's important to travel to Cuba, why it's important for American people to travel to Cuba. 2, I'm gonna make some comments about these recent trips that Mary and everybody else has been talking about.
I'm final. I'm going to talk about an upcoming project that we have with Veteran for Peace. I'm going to quickly introduce it, and I think somebody else is going to follow up on me. So, go straight to the point. And I wish I could see my audience. There's any way that actually you can put the camera so I can see the audience present?
Can we get, he wants to see, all the people here?
If not, it's okay. If it's not, it's okay. It's okay. No problem. It's not a big deal.
You just have the audience. He wants to talk to you guys.
Yeah. You know, because it's the first time that actually I do this hybrid meeting, presential and Zoom. So it's kind of a little different from.
They're here. They're here. Rapt attention.
Okay, good. Thank you. Okay, so I'm gonna give you 8 reasons why it's important to travel to Cuba. Okay, one, we're neighbors. And United States, it is a big house, a big mansion, and Cuba, it is a small, tiny house, but we're in the same block. We're right next to each other. In your house, you arrange things differently. And in our house, we arrange certain things differently as well. But we're still neighbors, and we still should visit each other. And we should say hello with each other and share our experience as people that we live in different houses, different sizes, different type of houses, but on the same block. That's reason number 1. 2, I think the United States and Cuba have sharing history. We live in the same region, and we have a lot of historical events that have made an impact in Cuban society, but also in the United States society. Besides, in the last 60 years, a significant number of Cubans live in southern Florida. That actually make a political impact, economic impact, but also cultural impact. So a lot of Cubans actually live in the United States, and this relationship of sharing our history, I think, is another good reason for you to come to visit this island. 3, I would say Cuba, and especially Havana, which is the capital. When you compare any capital in the world, and you put Havana next to Washington, D.C., or next to Mexico City, Buenos Aires, or Madrid, or Paris, Havana is still probably one of the safest destinations in the world. And it's one of probably, Cuba, one of the safest destinations in the world, because it's a place that the level of violence is very small. It's very, we do have some petty crime, but it's very small comparing with other big cities and other countries around the world. So it is a safe place to go, and everybody would like to be in a safe place. 4, it is a beautiful country. It's a beautiful country, but not only the landscape, the culture, the history, the architecture, and the social relations between Cubans. It is something beautiful because it is different. People here talk with each other everywhere. People go out, people party, people dance, people appreciate culture, people are engaged on also producing art and music, performing art, and others ways of expressing your identity. So it is a beautiful country from the landscape point of view, but also from cultural and from the history and the architecture. There's a lot to see, a lot to learn. 5, when we talk about culture, we talk about people. I don't want to sound chauvinist, but Cuban people in general are very friendly and warm. And there's a sense of hospitality that is becoming less common in the world today. And so people are active, people are smiling, people talk. And one of the reasons why Americans should come to Cuba, and if you haven't been to Cuba, is actually to meet Cuban people. Six, Cuba is been trying for 60 years, more than 60 years, to develop an alternative model of the model that is prevailed in the world. When I say an alternative model, I'm talking about a different way to arrange our social, political, and economic life. A model that pretend to be sustainable, pretend to be in harmony with the desires of the vast majority of people, and especially those people who are disadvantaged by various reasons. This alternative model, we call them here socialism. But we're still trying to discover what socialism is because we're still building it. We're still contracting. We're doing some sort of experiment, a social experiment in Cuba in which we're trying to do the same thing that everybody does in the world, but with a different way, in which we emphasize in certain values. One of those values is solidarity, for example. The difference, as you all probably know, the difference between solidarity and charity is charity, you share what is left over. And solidarity is what you share, what you have. As some people mentioned in the presentation about how the thousands of Latin American and African and third world, and including American students have come to study medicine here for free. And you also heard about doctors and health professionals, teachers who have gone around the world to offer their service. So this model, this alternative model that had to do with solidarity, it is something that you might be interested in and experiencing and seeing firsthand. Another value that this alternative model promotes is social justice. You know, we all talk about social justice in around the world, at the UN meetings, politics, but to actually implement a social justice system takes different priorities and a political. So I was saying that I was trying to give you some reasons of why people from the United States should travel to Cuba, and I hope I've already given you enough. But I'm going to finish with a couple things. I was talking about this, seeing a country that is trying to develop an alternative model, and a model that we call it here socialism, a model that's still under contraction, and a model that is based on certain values that we want to promote and be implemented in our society, especially for the next generations. We talk about solidarity and social justice, and we're just going to add internationalism is another value. And internationalism and solidarity can be practiced both ways. So, in spite of all this effort of Cuba to develop this society more just and with certain achievements that we feel very proud. And people mentioned here in the presentation about the vaccines. As you know, Cuba is the only Latin American country who has produced vaccines against COVID-19. And only one produced 5 vaccines and has been using three vaccines being implemented widely in the country. And Cuba was one of the first countries that was able to contain the pandemic, and one of the countries actually that have a very low mortality rate. In spite of all this effort, and in spite of the efforts of Cuba to be better, to share knowledge and share resources as much equal as possible with the vast majority of people, we've been confronting a war, because it is a war, and it's been a constant war from the United States government against the Cuban people. It's been a constant aggression and economic, financial, political, and also it's been always been the possibility to be a military intervention. Luckily, we haven't got to the point, but it's not being an issue that is being ruled out. So that's another reason. When you go to visit your neighbor and that living in a small, very modest house and a small house, and you see that the owner of your house is aggressing yours, you can come also to support the Cuban people and observe the resistance of these people, because Cuba is being going through many challenges, and recently we've been inserted in a very complex economic crisis, and so we have a lot of limitations. We do have blackout. We have a very limited supplies of food and other goodies. And so life is not being easy in certain aspects. So the only reason why people still maintain this model in spite of the aggression is the sense of resistance and the idea of no giving up your dreams, and spite that that the U.S. government is trying to make everything possible to strangle our economy, to strangle our people, and to smash Cuba politically, economically, socially, etc. Those are some of the reasons. I bet you might find other reasons to travel to Cuba. Cuba is also a place that is fun, a place that you learn everywhere you go. It's a place that that you can easily communicate, and it's also a place that you will be surprised that in spite of all the aggressions of the U.S. government to the Cuban people, people are not resented against American people. We have learned here since we're very little to make a difference between the U.S. government and all this ultra-right terrorist group in Miami, and with the people of the United States. So you will find Cubans who are very friendly to American, and Cubans who actually know a lot about United States. They know about sports, music, U.S. culture, politics, obviously, and a lot of people has actually relatives and friends in the United States. So it's a connection with the United States. So those are some of the reasons. I promised I was going to be less than 10 minutes, and it seems I'm going beyond my time. And I'm very sorry. So I'm going straight to the second point. I want to share some thoughts. Just one second. Okay, here. Okay. About the trip. First of all, I want to thank all of you who made the presentation. I think this group was a fun group. It was a group very diverse in different ages and different professional, different part of the United States, and it was the most important was eager to learn, because you came to Cuba with a purpose. You didn't came here to just drink mojitos and smoke cigar, which is a lot of you still do.
Although we did do that, just to be clear.
Because yes, and but also you came here to enjoy their culture, and you came with open-minded to go beyond so much propaganda against Cuba, so many myths that have been built around Cuba, so many lies as well that have been built about Cuba. At the same time, I think Cuba, the people that you met here during the week, they were very, as somebody mentioned here, was very sincere. We do have problems. We still, contracting things. We're still solving things. We're struggling with many things, and we're very sincere about our limitations and our challenges. But at the same time, we're very proud of our achievements, and I think we have a lot of reason to be proud. Finally, I want to mention that by the end of the year, we have a trip from the Veteran for Peace, which is the Peace Golden Rule Boat trip. Actually, this boat will sail to Cuba, will dock here at the Marina Hemingway in the western part of Cuba, and some of the people want to fly as well. And we're going to have a cultural program that will also have an opportunity for Americans to bring some humanitarian aid for the areas that were impacted by the hurricane in the western part of Cuba. But also, I'm going to show a little bit to Cubans the history of these Peace Golden Rule boats and this project, which is, I believe, somebody else is going to speak about. And the Golden Rule boat is a nuclear-free. It's been working around to have a nuclear-free world and being activists. So we're very proud that they decided to sail to Cuba, and actually we're going to learn here in Cuba about the activism. One more thing that I just want to mention that I forgot, that the SCOTA and Proximity Cuba and Code Pink we're planning other trips coming next year. So those of you who haven't been to Cuba, or those of you who have been to Cuba but they would like to return, please motivate yourself. This is actually a right time to travel to Cuba. And when you come to Cuba with a purpose, it's even more important. That's why I'm so proud that you are doing this report back, because you're taking an action. You're telling others your experience. And that, I think that's important. That's how we perhaps change U.S. foreign policy toward the Cuban people. Thank you.
Thank you, Rodrigo. Yay. We're glad we connected with you. And we're done basically, but I just wanted to say that there are several trips going to Cuba. I think there's flyers for Solidarity Collective 1 and on the table back there, and KBAEM Radio is sponsoring a trip. So you can find out about those, but we will encourage you to contact Solidarity Committee of the Americas. It'll be on our Facebook page about the trip that we're going to have, and also these 2 other trips that we will try to advertise, the Veterans for Peace trip and the Code Pink trip. And I think we've done everything except money. Give us money. It's a good capitalist thing to do. And so thank you again, everybody, for coming here in the room and people on Zoom and Facebook Live. We really appreciate it. And we appreciate the group of travelers who gave us their presentation and told us their great experiences in Cuba. And do you have anything else you want to say, Jairus or Mary?
Just go to Cuba. It's a beautiful country.
Yes, I agree. Do you have anything else you want to say?
No, thank you. I just love Cuba.
We're the Cuba fan club here.
Yeah.
So go to Cuba. Contact SCOTA if you have questions about any of the trips. We'll link you up with the trips. So thanks again. Thanks, Rodrigo, for visiting us from Havana. And thank you to everybody in the room.